So I wanted to briefly talk about how a US senator recently sent Valve a letter expressing concern over Steam's inability to fight Nazis, white supremacy, misogyny, and other quote-unquote hateful content on the platform. Now, if you don't know what Steam is, and I imagine some of my followers might not know, it's the largest computer game distribution platform in the world. It's run by a company called Valve, which was started by a guy named Gabe Newell. It has over 132 million monthly active users and brings in over $4 billion each year. In any case, in her letter to Gabe, Senator Hassan of New Hampshire wrote, quote, Steam has a significant presence of users displaying and espousing neo-Nazi, extremist, racial supremacist, misogynistic, and other hateful sentiments. Valve should be taking steps to prevent harmful content, especially given the relationship between online comments and violence in the offline world. Unquote. Now, many of the outlets reporting on this letter say things like, the problem isn't new, and then they link to various groups whom they deem to be white supremacist. Groups such as, for example, hyper-gay Nazi niggers and Nazi pony fags. And no, I'm not making those names up. Those are legitimate names cited in the various articles online reporting about the supposed hate groups on Steam. Clearly, Senator Hassan and the ADL, whom she cites in her letter, can't discern between actual Nazis and antisocial Zoomers. These people are not spreading any ideology whatsoever, nor are they spreading hate. What they're spreading is nihilism. They're getting cheap thrills by violating what they vaguely understand to be sacred norms. Now, there are many ironies here, but one that immediately comes to mind is that actual Nazis, the people who dressed up in Hugo Boss uniforms during the 1930s, would never have tolerated this sort of behavior. They would not have tolerated games like Sex with Hitler. Say what you will about the Nazis in 1930s Germany, but they were not nihilistic. They would be greatly offended by things like Nazi pony fags. It's truly bizarre that the ADL and US senators are upset about sexual fringe groups making a mockery of National Socialism. Again, these people don't post 1488 because they care about the preservation of the white race. They don't care about anything except lols. Which brings us to another irony. I do have nuanced views on the Jewish identity that I won't go into here, but suffice it to say that Jews have been grossly overrepresented in bringing about a post-war cultural revolution in which all traditional norms were to be destroyed. In other words, organized Jewry, to a very real extent, has played a significant role in bringing about the very kind of nihilism they're now complaining about.
There have been many Santa Clauses throughout history. Some were loved, others loathed. But the position of Santa has mostly been a white man's game.
Exactly, it's fucking crazy. Things have gotta change.
My advice to you is, oh, if I die, get rid of my porn!
In post-war Europe, in the larger Anglosphere, the Holocaust is a sacred narrative alongside Jewish victimhood. But the Jewish war on traditionalist norms in the West, which can also be seen as a war on the sacred, has brought about the very end of all that is sacred. They've created a kind of 21st century nothing that is consuming everything in its path. But of course, they don't understand this. While senators are concerned over the potential exposure of a child to so-called hate, they don't seem to care much about all the anime and furry porn on Steam. Games like Koikatsu Party, where young boys online can build an anime girl to have sex with, or games like Furry Girl Puzzle. Technically, Steam set an anything goes policy back in January. You can read the full letter if you want, but basically, Valve will allow anything on the platform provided it doesn't break the law. This is how we get such great games like Cuckold Simulator and Tyrone vs. the Cops. Or how about Genital Jousting, where you play as a penis named John who has to find a date for his high school reunion. To be clear, I'm barely scratching the surface here in terms of what's available for purchase. Now, libertarians think that an anything goes policy is just fucking great, but it's really not. Society is dying culturally, spiritually, economically, and politically, and it's all permissible according to certain gamer types because they value lols and hedonistic freedom over the very preservation of life itself. People today would rather trash every aspect of the world our ancestors gave us rather than exercise a single iota of self-control. Now, it does matter who is in control of society and what their motives are. Contrary to what people like Jordan Peterson say, being smart isn't enough. The people in charge must feel empathy, compassion, and, most importantly, a sense of kinship toward those they rule over. But in our society, the rulers only have scorn and hostility for their subjects. Groups like the ADL, for example, are not concerned about maintaining a healthy society so much as they're concerned about how a healthy society might harm their interests. But of course, libertarian computer nerd types like Gabe Newell aren't much better either. They are liberal extremists in the classical sense, or rather, a misguided classical sense. Allowing unregulated content creation actually violates the non-aggression principle, but libertarians can't see or understand how. For example, letting everyone drink tons of soda and eat lots of processed foods harms society because it detracts from overall health and stability. It raises the cost of medical care and clogs up the system. But some people make a lot of money off it, and so libertarians are more than happy to make pseudo-moralistic arguments about how the greatest expression of freedom in life is to be able to gorge yourself on Cheetos. Likewise, Steam allowing the generation and sale of absolutely anything that is quote-unquote legal does something similar on a psychological level. Any and all negative forces and proclivities are allowed to grow unhindered and unchecked. In the end, an anything-goes mentality enslaves us to vice, whims, and impulses, which in turn lead us into nihilistic oblivion.